Hello, I'm Sterling Edwards. Thank you for joining me at the Artefacto YouTube channel. I've been teaching acrylic painting for well over 10 years. Being an acrylic painter is a wonderful experience, and a lot of my students are doing quite well. They took the ball and they just ran with it. They're doing some beautiful work, beautiful abstract pieces, beautiful landscapes, and so forth. My process really focuses on just getting the bare essentials that you need to make it all come together, and then developing yourself as an artist to where you have a very individual style of painting. My job is to guide you along. So I hope that you'll watch this video and watch this all the way to the very end. I don't want you to miss anything. There's some good information we're going to talk about. Thank you. All right, now I've got my photograph up here. It's kind of off camera, but I'm trying to zoom mostly on this so you can see what I'm doing. Now I'm going to draw this very dark. I don't usually draw my shapes as dark, but I want them to really show up on your cameras. That's just a bunch of rocks like this. They're out on the seashore. There's a rock comes down like that. And again, I'm using a 2B pencil. So there's a horizon line right up here, and the horizon line kind of goes down like this. And there's more rocks out here. And there's some trees and rocks up in this area. Now the trees are just very crazy looking. They're pine trees. They're very windswept. So I'm just making random shapes that suggest there's some trees up there on the ridge. There's bushes down in here like this. So what I'm doing, I'm laying out a roadmap more or less of where I want to go. This is my center of interest right here. And this is then subscribing to the rule of thirds. If you divide your paper into thirds vertically and thirds horizontally, any place a line's cross can be a center of interest. And you notice my center of interest is right here in this lower 1/3. So this area is going to be the star of the show. When I work on a piece like this, and I've established where my center of interest is going to be located, I usually start where my center of interest is and start painting out from that point. One thing I've got to be careful not to do, and I stress this to all of my students, is don't start getting up in these areas and getting too detailed and too picky, because if you do, it's going to totally steal the show from this. You want this to be very dynamic. All these shapes up here are here just to make this look good. So don't get caught up in this routine of having to make everything look exactly perfect, because it doesn't have to. We're just trying to give the viewer something pleasing to look at. There's some more big rocks like that. And out here in the ocean, I'm just a little suggestion of a little bit of an ocean wave out here. Not a whole lot. That really is as much drawing as I need to do. So, my drawing only took 5 minutes to do, maybe a little bit longer, but not much. So we're just trying to get enough information in here that I kind of know where to start putting my midtones and my darker values. Let's get this pencil out of the way. And let's see if we can't mix some of these colors. I'm going to start with some yellow ochre. Now, the reason I chose yellow ochre, I want to make some pretty grays. I'm looking for gray greens, gray violets. Yellow ochre is a beautiful color for that. Here's some of my permanent violet dark. And so I just squeezed out just about an inch wide. And here's my Hooker's green. Hooker's green is a very, very intense green. What I like about Hooker's green is I can readily mix it with all these blacks and whites, all the other colors I have mixed beautifully with the Hooker's green. I'm gonna put some black right over here, and I'm keeping the black away from my other colors. This is Mars black, very, very intense. It's a very strong paint. It only takes a tiny little bit to totally change the color of something, so don't get too carried away with it. And here I'm putting some white, titanium white right here, which I'll use just to help mix some of these colors. So let's start out with just mixing kind of a nice kind of a grayish green. So I'm going to take some of my yellow ochre. I'm putting just a touch of black in it. Very, very little. Like I said, the black will quickly overpower something if you're not careful. Now I can put just a tiny bit of the green in it. And I got this beautiful dark kind of a greenish, grayish yellow, which is kind of what I want at this stage. So all we're trying to do right now is just block in where some of the darker colors and darker shapes are going to be. Let's also get some black and some green over here. To learn more about painting with acrylics and get exclusive tips, click on the link in the description, register for my video, It's a free marathon. Yes, it is a free marathon. It's called The Art of Acrylic. We cover lots of things. We cover everything from a composition, taking subject matter and breaking it down into the basic elements that you need. We talk about design factors, things that make a painting really, really work, in addition to just lots of interesting brush techniques and color mixing and so forth. It's a great way to paint. And I really do like to take questions and guide people right through the process of creating a wonderful work of art using acrylics. So join me right now. It's like I said, click on the link in the video description and we'll take you right into the whole process. Thank you. That's a very dark grayish greens. I put the black in it. So this gives me a starting point. These two mixes of color right here give me something to kind of begin the piece with. And I'm going to begin with a relatively large brush. That's a 1-inch brush. I can get the brush wet. I'm doing that just because it kind of helps move the paint. Now, I've also got a roll of paper towels, by the way. And you cannot see me, but I'm also wearing an apron. I highly recommend when you work with acrylics, wear an apron. Because when this stuff gets in your clothes, you can't wash it out. Just have an apron. Let's start out by taking some of these greens. I'm using that big brush. So I'm not trying to go in there and paint every little trim. What I'm doing, I'm putting color down, just like this, using big brush strokes. And every painting has to go through what they call the uglies. This is the uglies right here. I put a little bit more black in that. So what this is my underpainting. This is where I establish where my lights and darks are going to be. I'm not trying to make anything look refined at this point. That'll come tomorrow. All we're doing right now, we're just trying to just get some color on the paper. And I'm looking at all these trees up here.
Sterling, we have a suggestion from someone who's asking, can you just move everything down a little bit so that they can see the reference as well? Maybe that's possible to see both
Yeah, let me see. Hold on one
painting
second here.
and the reference at the same time.
That's
Now
what I
we
was
at least see. Can you move it down 1 more inch?
And now I can. It's up. Well, I can. Let me try this. How's
That's
okay?
yeah. You can even. That's
Oh,
perfect.
okay.
Thanks.
How was
Now
that?
we get a sense of it at least.
All right.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Now there's a bunch of bushes down in here. You see all those pretty green bushes? So all we're doing, we're just putting color down. There's some more of the black. There's some more yellow ochre. These are just a bunch of bushes. Here's a big rock. Now I'm leaving the. See, I'm painting around these rocks. It's not important right now that I work on painting the rocks. I got lots of time to paint those later. And this is when I first learned how to paint, I saw people do things like this. And my first thought was, what in the world are they doing? This is just horribly ugly. But you've got to have this. There's a lot of white paper here. We have to find some way to tone that white down and get rid of it. So we can come in later on and start putting some more beautiful colors in this piece. So I'm using all these midtones, yellow ochre, greens, blacks, just to kind of tone things down a little bit. And put a little bit of white in some of this. Let me caution you one thing. When you use white, like I'm using here, white is extremely chalky. Try not to use too much white, because if you do, your painting gets a very chalky look to it. That's one of the problems I had when I first started using acrylics. I was not used to using white paint, and I overdid it, and everything just looked very, very chalky and just gritty. And I finally learned just to kind of tone it down a little bit. Now let's get a little bit more of this darker vibe. I'm putting some black and green. I'm putting just a little tiny bit of this permanent violet in. This is a really strong dark right in here. And we have to have these darks to see the pretty light areas we're going to put in later on. So this dark is all the stuff that's up underneath the bushes, up under the trees. And again, we're still going around the rocks. Now, if it starts getting dry, depending on where you are, it might dry quicker than other times. Because right now it's very warm in my studio. It got cold last night, so I'm just putting a little bit of mist on my paper. That's just very light little mist. That makes it easier to move the paint. I can put a little bit of water on my brush if I need to. So this area down in here's got just these beautiful beautiful green colors. Here I'm kind of painting around some of these rocks. You notice I'm keeping that brush moving. I don't work on one area too long. You work on this a little bit, then come down and work on this a little bit. Keep the brush moving all the time. If you sit there and play with this for 10 minutes, this is all going to dry while you're doing it. Sometimes you want to keep that paper nice and keep the paint nice and moist by just moving around. Keep a fresh edge on it. Now I'm using a little bit more of the green and the yellow ochre. Get some brighter colors up in here.
Sterling, we have a lot of question about choosing the brushes for acrylic paints. Is
Okay.
there anything that you can share with us? Like, what's the key to finding a good acrylic brush?
Well, the brush I'm using right now is an oil painting brush. It's a China bristle. It's about a 3/4 inch wide brush. It's fairly stiff. Uh, like I said, when you're working with heavy body paints and you're working on a very gritty textured paper like I'm doing, you've got to have something that's relatively stiff enough that it'll move that heavy paint. Because if it's not, you just kind of skimming the surface. I want something that gets there and just really pushes that paint around. And since I'm doing a this can be a very painterly piece, I want lots of pretty brush strokes, and these heavier, stiffer brushes give me beautiful, expressive brush strokes, which I think is the key to making these paintings so attractive. Now let's get that brush and keep that in the water. One of the biggest mistakes my students make is they'll lay their brush down and they'll use another brush and they come back later on. This one's as hard as a rock. Keep the brush wet or else dry it off. Here's another brush. Here's a 1-inch flat watercolor brush. Let's take some of this pretty violet. I'm mixing some yellow ochre with it. I'm making a nice cool mid-tone for these rocks. So these were the rocks are going to be right here. Now the rocks will be much lighter than this in the finished painting. But I think I'm going to use a different brush. That's not moving the paint quite as much as I hoped it would. Here's another one of these very stiff oil painting brushes. So I've got the violet. I've got some ochre. Ochre, by the way, is a yellow. Violet, of course, is a purple. Purple and yellow make a gray. So I got this beautiful gray color for my rocks. And just quickly brush it in. Don't remember, we're not trying to stay inside pencil lines right now. We're just trying to get color on the paper. We have lots of time come in later on and refine these colors, make them look like they're individual things. Right now, it's all about just getting started. Now, this is a painterly piece. A painterly piece is very brushy. You want that beautiful brush stroke. That's what makes it look painterly. It has a very artistic look to it. Think of a Van Gogh. Everybody's seen a Van Gogh painting. They were so beautiful because he was a master at developing these beautiful brush strokes. Everything he did had incredible brush work. And that's what made his painting so drop dead gorgeous. He didn't get caught up in this routine of trying to make everything look just perfect. He just wanted it to look like whatever it was he was trying to portray to the viewer. And he is one of my role models, actually, when it comes to doing my more expressive pieces, because I just think he was just, as everybody else agrees, he was probably the most incredible artist that's ever lived. The man had total abandon when he painted, and that's what made his work so gorgeous. He didn't get caught up in the little nuances. He was having too much fun just being an artist. So let's put a little bit more color on some of these rocks. There's some rocks out here that are kind of a brownish violet. So when you block a piece in like I'm doing here, it doesn't take long to do it. But the important thing is it's got to be done. There's some rocks out in the ocean. Putting some rocks out here. And I'm doing this pretty quickly. I want everybody to have time to work on their pieces, and we also want time to cover all the things we're going to cover in this class today. And then down here at the bottom, there's just, of course, there's more rocks. We'll develop these rocks later. You notice I left that white where my center of interest is, right up in here. Now we'll come in later on, put some color on that just a little bit, but just leaving that area of white, look how the eye goes right to that spot already. This will have a lot of red in it in tomorrow's step, so I'm not getting too caught up in colors down in here. So the painting right now, for all intents and purposes, it's pretty blocked in. I haven't done anything up here. Let's put just a little bit of color up in that area where the sky is, and also that's where the water is. I'm going to take some of my white, going just a touch of the violet, and just a little tiny bit of the hooker's green. The violet, of course, has blue in it. Now, right up in here, made this beautiful color for the sky. I'm just kind of just quickly blocking that in. And that color will change tomorrow when I get more color on my palette. But right now, we're just trying to suggest where the sky is going to be.
Now, Sterling, we have more brush questions, and people are
Okay.
curious what kinds of bristles are suitable for acrylics. Do you know that?
Anything that's suitable for oil paints is suitable for bristles. If you want a stiff brush, now these are just oil painting brushes. I really can't tell you what kind of bristle they are. They're just a very stiff oil painting brush. I'm assuming they're probably like a China bristle, something like that. But you can also use something like this, which is a very, very soft nylon brush, which also works quite well for, as you see, I can take that nylon brush. See how wet that paint is? That's very fluid and wet. So I'm using almost like a watercolor. So I'm using a watercolor brush. So I can come in like this and just put all kinds of beautiful colors in here if I want to, just like this. And again, it gives that nice, pretty brush stroke. So everything we do right now is designed really just to kind of set the stage for what's coming later. So I've got things kind of blocked in. What I'm going to do right now in this first step, I'm going to come in and start putting a few stronger dark. And I'm going to use this stiffer China bristle brush. We know we got some nice, pretty dark up in these trees. You can see it right in here. It's much darker than what I've got. So let's get some more of this violet, more of the green, a little bit of the black. Now I'm going to come in and make this a little bit darker.
And now, Sterling, we have a couple of more minutes, and then we will move on. I hope that that's enough.
It is. You let me
Okay,
know when you're ready to move on, and I'll lay this brush down. I'm going to get a few more darks in real quick. It'll only take about 2 minutes, and then we'll stop and we'll
That's
move on to the
perfect. Perfect,
next thing.
perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So look how quickly, just in a matter of a few minutes, we have kind of blocked in our painting. We've blocked in the colors. We know where all the where most of the darks are going to be. We know where most of the shapes of the trees are going to be. Everything's kind of just laid out for us. We can come in later on and really kind of go to town on this. That's a good place to stop right there. Okay, this is relatively dry. It's as dry as it needs to be because I can come in now and start adding some more dark. So like I said, when you first start out, all you're really trying to do is just get rid of all the white paper except the areas that you want to leave white. These can be highlighted areas. I'm not getting a lot of paint on those. I could, but it's not necessary. And I did spray I did put a little bit of mist of color on my palette to keep these paints relatively moist as I was working on other things. But now I can come in and start putting a little bit more of a kind of a lighter mid-tone in a few places. For example, I've got some of this yellow ochre. Let's put a bit right over here and see how it looks. It's not quite light enough. Let's add a little bit more white to it. Like I said, be very cautious with the white. It can just dominate a painting if you're not careful. See, now I can come in and put just a few little lighter areas. Now I'm going to take my finger and dip it in my little bucket of water, my little bottle. I can take my finger and kind of smear that around. And then I just wipe it off on a paper towel. So from time to time, I will do that. I will just use my finger as a little blending aid. Here I'm taking some more of the violet. Let's see if we can put a violet right up in here. These can be some background rocks. Right now it looks very flat, but it's going to change very soon. I got this nice, relatively watered down paint. So I'm taking some of my yellow ochre and some more of the titanium white. Let's see if we can't come down and paint these rocks just a little bit. Now we're not trying to get real detailed. Remember, this is a painterly piece. Take my finger and move an edge if we need to. Your finger is the best blending tool you have. Don't ever hesitate to do that. Just put a little moisture on your finger. So what I'm doing right now, I'm just trying to get some pretty darker midtones in some of these rocks. These are just violets and a little bit of the yellow ochre. We're setting the stage for what's going to come later on, probably tomorrow, when we put the really nice, beautiful brights in this piece. Let's keep adding some more of this. Here's my little bit of titanium white, a little bit of the yellow ochre, a little bit of the violet. When you start out with a very limited palette, like I did today, you're really not concerned about getting color in this piece. What you're concerned with is just getting just harmonious colors that kind of work well together. Everything has a nice unified, uh, cohesive quality to it. Even down in here, there's more rocks like this. So this area is going to be really bold when this piece is finished. And I know it will be, but like I said, when you first start out, you just want to just get the color down. There's lots of time to go in and embellish it later on. Now I'm going to come in now and start putting a few darker values where some of my really strong shadows are. So I'm taking from the black. I'm mixing just a little bit of green with it, the hooker's green. That's a pretty strong mix of dark. But I know this rock has some beautiful dark right around the edge over here, like this. And you can really see that rock start to pop out now. Again, I can take my finger, just kind of blend that out a little bit. Look how the edge of that rock just jumps off. Let's put a little bit more right over here. And again, take my finger and kind of blend it out a little bit. Now the center of interest is starting to take on just a little bit of a dominance, which is nice. The reason I use my finger, by the way, I can get a much softer blend using my finger than I can a brush, because I can take my finger and just go like this with it. A brush, we have a tendency to get too stiff with a brush, but this gives me just a beautiful way to take that black and kind of move it around where I want it, get it where in the right places. So I'm looking at my photograph and looking at this area right over here. There's some rocks right in there. There's a big rock over here like this. And again, just kind of blend it out. We're not trying to paint individual rocks so much that we're just trying to create the illusion that there are lots of rocks. Up here in the water, out in the ocean, there's some pretty rocks. Soft edges are great. Anytime you work on something, you want a balance of hard edges. You got a very hard edge right here, and you have soft edges here. You always want to balance your hard edges and your soft edges. They naturally complement each other. They just give the painting a beautiful artistic look. So I'm just bouncing some of these darks around in here, just in a few places. I can put a little bit more dark along the bottom down here. But you see the painting starting to come alive now. Now up in the trees, there's some pretty strong dark up in this area. Let's make that even darker than what I have. There's a big rock right here. Let's go around that rock like this. Put some pretty dark in here. And again, put that finger to work. You're starting to see this really beautiful grouping of rocks. And every rock does not have to be spelled out perfectly. We're just giving the viewer enough information that they say that's just a big pile of rocks. That's all they need to see at this point. There'll be plenty of time for them to come in later on and pick it apart and try to find individual shapes. But right now, it's just a matter of just giving the viewer enough they can kind of see where you're going with it. It's very easy, by the way. This is the stage where we get impatient. We want to go so badly into the really good, juicy stuff. And in doing so, we forget about this particular stage. This is a very important stage of the painting. This is a big bush. See that big bush right in here? I'm putting some dark around the top of it. I can take my finger, kind of soften that edge a little bit. Now I get this nice bushy shape. Very, very dark. There's more of the trees. And there's more trees back up in this area. I'm putting a rock right here. There actually isn't one in the photograph, but I'm doing it just to have one of these rocks over on this side of the painting. Maybe even a couple of them, just to create a little bit more balance. This is artistic license. This is why, you know, just because it's not in the photograph does not mean you cannot put it in the painting. It's your piece of art. You can put anything. You can put a horse in that painting if you want to. It's yours. But I'm just saying, yeah, when you work on a piece and you're working from a photograph like I'm doing here, just remember that photograph is just a starting point. It's just an idea. What you do with it beyond that is entirely up to you. So don't get caught up in that trap of making everything look just exactly perfect, because it doesn't have to be. Now you notice when I put these darks in, look how it's more prominent, these areas of light look. This would be a lot of red down in here. I'm not going to leave all that totally white. In fact, let's just color some of that up a little bit. That's a little bit of yellow ochre. And there'd be a lot of red bushes in here. It's some kind of a ground cover. I'm not sure what it is, but it's a beautiful kind of a brownish red. It's one of the things that really prompted me to photograph this piece, that beautiful red next to these dark greens. So the red and green, they're complementary colors. They just work well together.
We have a question about
Sure.
how to recover a white shape if the white acrylic looks chalky. Is there a way to recover that chalky look so that it looks more vibrant?
After it dries, you can easily come back and paint over it, which gives you an opportunity maybe to kind of subdue it just a little bit. That's why, you know, one of the biggest problems I had, honestly, when I started using white paint, because like I said, I was a watercolorist. I wasn't used to using white. It took me quite some time to learn not to get too heavy with the white, because we start getting too dependent on it, which is not a bad thing, but it's something we want to try to keep some control over. So if you start getting something that's a little bit too white or too chalky, just back away from it, let it dry. You can always come back later on and just redo the whole area. So don't get too don't let it stress you. It's just what it is. But there are ways to come back and kind of embellish later on if you need to. If you look at this piece now, you see lots of rocks. You see lots of things happening. What it really needs right now, it needs more color. It needs, of course, the light coming through the trees, like you see up here, the pretty aqua color of the water. Now, those are things that are going to really help this painting come along. But in the meantime, we're going to put just a few more rocks, and then I'll be finished with this stage of the painting. It'll pretty much be ready for tomorrow's presentation. Let me get that brush nice and clean. I'm going to put a couple more rocks over here. I'm using some of the titanium white. Okay, and I've got some of the violet. I've got a little bit of the yellow ochre. That's that pretty kind of grayed down rocky color. Let's put a rock right over here like this, a couple more. Get the finger out. Soften the edge if we need to. Not every edge needs softening. Remember, you want a nice balance of hard and soft edges, so that every once in a while, just come in and just soften a couple edges. This has a nice movement to it now. You notice how the eye kind of goes like this up into the painting. Your center of interest is right here. Now, once I put some light back in these trees, which there will be, like you see the light coming through the trees, it's going to really, this piece is going to come alive very quickly as we get into the final stages tomorrow. But at this stage, we do just have to know when to just put just enough to tell the story, but don't get too carried away with it. It's easy to get in there and start trying to make it look too perfect at this stage. This isn't about perfection. This is about just getting the right mood in a painting, letting the viewer see the way let them see what you want them to see. Because as artists, we can manipulate the viewer. We can make them go anywhere we want by where we put our lights and our darks and what kind of shapes we make. So I want this to have a nice, pretty mood, lots of pretty red and dark greens. It should be a pretty, I'm thinking it should be a pretty striking piece when it's finished. You never know till you sign it, but I know that everything I've done so far is going to definitely help advance it to that level. So we'll just wait and see how that plays out. So I'm just about at a point right now, Hannah, where I'm going to stop, and we can go back to you. And like,
Yeah, we have some
let's do that
questions
right
that
now.
you might be able to answer. We have,
Sure.
that's my dog making some sounds. Why isn't there any red in your palette, though it is also primary color and we can see it in the picture? Is that because you will edit tomorrow?
Right. We're going to add the red tomorrow. So what I've done right now, this is all my underpainting. This is where I've established my composition. I've established my neutral midtones and darker values. The red is it's a more vibrant, bright color. So there'll be a lot of red in here tomorrow. There'll be some red up in this area where you see it in the photograph. But the red will come in towards the end. And the reason I'm doing that is, if you look at this paint, there's a lot of green. There's a lot of green in this piece. And if we come in at this stage and start pushing the green and the red together, it's going to turn into a neutral gray. They'll neutralize each
Mm.
other, and they could very easily turn into mud. So when you work on a piece, you have to be aware of the complementary colors. One of the reasons I chose this particular scene to paint was because there were these beautiful reds and greens, which gives me a chance to really show how to balance them out and manipulate the two without getting muddy. So when you work on a piece like this, first thing I do is block it in. So I left some light on top of the rocks, left some light where the water is, a little peaks of light in here, but everything else is pretty much midtones and darks. But that's the foundation. It's just like building a house. You start with the foundation and then you build up. Same thing with a painting, especially with acrylics. You start with your darks and your midtones just to lay your foundation in, then come in on dry paper or dry canvas, whichever, and start adding your lights. When I put the red in this piece tomorrow and put in the lights, it's going to just come alive. It's going to just pop. But you got to go through the uglies, and this is the uglies right here.
Mhm. We have some technical questions and we do have time for them. So I'm thinking that let's grab a couple of minutes and focus on these questions. We had a question from Lau earlier on who asks, what happens if you use bad paper but with a layer of gesso? What would you say?
You can use watercolor paper without using gesso. The problem you run into is if you use water as a base as a medium to mix your paint, which I do. You got a brush that's got a lot of water in it, and you have paint with water in it, and you put it on untreated paper. Watercolor paper is designed to suck up the water. It's designed to pull that water into the paper, which means it's not as easy to move the paint around the surface because all the water has gone out of your brush and out of your paint. It's all been absorbed into the paper. If you gesso the paper, it seals the paper to where you have much more opportunity to have total freedom moving the paint around on the surface without it being drawn into the paper. So you can do
Actually,
that.
I think that the question was about if you use gesso, can you use a very poor quality paper or can you use wood panel? Can you use
Oh yeah, you
like
can use
does
anything.
it
If
yeah.
if you're gonna gesso, I mean, yeah. I'm sorry, I misunderstood that question, but you can certainly uh, keep your eyes open on the sales. Every art supply store has sales where you can buy 25 sheets of 300-pound paper for whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a top of the line brand. Now, if you're doing a watercolor, I disagree. I would just totally reverse that. If you're using a watercolor, if doing a watercolor, you want top of the line paper. It
Mm.
makes all the difference in the world. But when you're doing something like this and you're going to put a gesso coating on it, absolutely buy the cheapest paper you can get.
Oh, interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that.
That was a great question. I'm glad you asked that because that's something I don't generally think about to tell people, but I'm glad I had an opportunity to.
Mm. We
Well,
also have a
let me tell you,
question.
I am all about helping artists save money. I have spent
Yeah.
thousands and thousands and thousands on art supplies, most of which I don't even use anymore. A lot of it I donate to high schools because they need stuff because it just clutters up my studio. I'm all about just get what you need to do the job and don't get too caught up in this mindset that we have to have every new brush and new color that comes out.
Mm. And we can always buy something later. We don't have to start with hundreds of materials. We can
E-
always start with something.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then when we realize that we need that magenta, we can buy it instead of just because we love it was a pretty color. We also have a question from Lena asking, do you recommend using a medium to help the acrylics paint not to get dry quickly? So basically to dry more slowly. Do you use that?
I don't use that. Now there's a latex medium you can buy. It's called a latex acrylic varnish, but it's also a medium which you can use it to thin your paint out so the paint flows easily. And when you do that, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I did it for years. I don't do it anymore. What I do nowadays, I paint my pieces without using a medium, and then quite often after the piece is finished and it's dried overnight, then I'll take a big brush and put a coating of medium on top of it because it's also a varnish. And you can get that varnish in a flat or a semi-gloss or a gloss. I like the semi-gloss And I'll tell you why, because when the paint is dried, you put that semi-gloss medium and let it dry, it makes the darks look darker. It makes the painting really pop. It puts a
Mm.
very light little shine on the piece and the colors just come alive. As far as using it to mix your colors, you can do that, of course. I would recommend experimenting with it and see if that really suits you the way you paint.
Mm.
If it doesn't, then of course you can always discontinue that practice. But I'm all about experimenting and just see what works best for you.
We have another technical question from Rena. First, thanks for sharing that, Sterling. And then Rena is asking, is it possible to paint with palette knives and thick pigment or thick paint in acrylics?
Yes, absolutely.
Mm.
And in fact, a lot of artists they will do like an underpainting, like I've just done here, and then they'll take their palette knife and they'll just load that thing full of very thick impasto paint. Impasto means really heavy body, thick, like a clump of butter. And they'll take that knife and just move it around any way they want. You don't want to do that when you're blocking it in, because your block in needs to be very loose and very almost fluid washes of color. But then you come in and, for example, the top of that rock, I could, if I wanted to, I'm not going to on this piece, but I could if I wanted to, take a palette knife and just pop in a really strong highlight on top of that rock with a very thick impasto layer of paint. I don't use palette knives a whole lot like that, but a lot of people do, and their work is breathtaking.
Mm. Thank you. Yeah, it sounds like an expressive technique that would work very well for acrylics. Chris is asking, what do you use as a palette for the paint? Is it paper or is it ceramics or something else?
Yeah, this is if you look at this, that's just like it's wax paper. It's a
Oh,
disposable
wax.
palette. You can buy these at any art supply store, and they come in different sizes. But it's essentially just a wax paper, and you can at the end of the day, you can just peel it off and throw it in the trash, and you have a clean piece underneath. Uh, I highly recommend using these as opposed to using a standard, palette like you hold in your hand or something, because acrylic, when it dries as hard as a rock. And oil paints, if you do an oil painting where you're holding a palette and doing an oil painting, you can lay that palette down for a week and still wipe the paint off of it because it takes oils a long time to dry.
Mm.
These will dry overnight, and if you leave it on your palette, the next day you got this big rock hard chunk of paint that you can't get off your palette. These are just the greatest thing in the world, and you can buy them
Mm.
at any art supply store. It's just a paper palette, and they're fantastic.
Thank you so much for that in the middle of the workshop.
Well, I hope you found the information in that video helpful. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We assist everyone that comes in with everything from how to master drawing skills, how to apply paint. There's so much to learn, and this is such a wonderful, wonderful learning opportunity. So join us, immerse yourself in the wonderful world of art, and follow the link in the video registration to register for my marathon. Hopefully I'll see you there. Thank you.